And now, the Elections Commission, in partnership with the GM Week Committee, is proud to bring you, the members of the Rensselaer Student Union, a very special event. For the first time in our union history, a second GM Week debate. Presenting your returning host and moderator, the EC Chair, Timothy Miles.
Members of the union, I have to start by saying I'm incredibly surprised to be here. We've had ties before, we even had runoffs before, but a tie for GM? Tonight, we're all living in history. But surprised as we are, we're also quite thankful from the EC. Your engagement as voters has made this possible, and your willingness to put up with the extended election cycle has demonstrated the democratic values at the core of our student union. But before I get to what we're all waiting for, which is the candidates, quick moment to thank some people. Thank you to WRPI, Union Showtech, GM Week Committee, RPI TV, union staff, for all the work they've put into organizing this event. It was put together on quite the short notice, and there's really no present for it, so thank you for all the work that you put in. Also, thank you to the candidates. The candidates were not actually required to be here. They volunteered to be here and asked for this debate. So they all wanted this opportunity to engage you again. So definitely say thank you to them for being willing to put up with this on another night of their week. So now on to the candidates.
And now, starting with the Grand Marshal. The Grand Marshal is the highest elected office in the RPI Student Union, serving as the leader and chief spokesperson for the student body. The GM presides over the Student Senate, the chief legislative and representative body of the student union. The GM has regular meetings with institute officials and serves on a number of institute committees. The time commitment required for this position is substantial. The 2024 GM candidates are Vivian Rose-Nashan, and Ria Masoni.
So guys, real quick, first question. Why am I here again?
It's a very good question. I could ask actually all of you why we're here right now is because it was a tie, and so every vote counts.
Go vote on Wednesday.
All right, thank you. Anyways, debate. Again, to remind everyone, I'm going to quickly go over the format. The candidates have also been given this ahead of time, and you were also hopefully here for last debate, so it should be pretty similar. Several sections, general questions, specific questions, lightning round, short break, and then audience questions. Each candidate will also be permitted to make a short opening and closing statement. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond to questions, with a cue given at 30 seconds. The cue is going to be given by the production team this time, rather than myself. The candidates have also been given 1 green card and 2 red cards. A green card can be used to add an additional 1 minute to their time, and a red card can be used to respond to another candidate for 1 minute. Each card may only be used once. The questions have been prepared by a panel of students representing the membership of the union. Sample debate topics were provided to the candidates ahead of time, but the questions were not. Audience questions can be asked live or submitted through the Google form. Similar to last time, as moderator, I did not write any of the questions, and as a result, reserve the right to declare any questions or statements out of order. Candidates may also choose to refuse any question they believe is out of order. And again, same as last time, for the audience, you're allowed to be energetic, you're allowed to be enthusiastic, and you're allowed to show some spirit. However, I will ask you to be respectful. It's a lot to be up on this stage, especially for a second time, and you want to hear the answers for this candidates you are voting for, especially with how close this race is going to be. Anyway, enough with the rules. We're going to go into opening statements. I believe Ria won the rock, paper, scissors, so she'll be going first.
Yes, so hi everyone, my name is Ria Masodi, and I'm a senior computational biology and science, technology, and society major. And next fall, I'll be starting my master's in biology. I definitely did not expect to be back on this stage, but I do appreciate and really want to thank everyone that has made this possible. And now, before I get too far along, I actually want to clear up a few things. In running for Grand Marshal, with my face pretty much everywhere around campus, I expect people to talk a bit, and I welcome the criticism. It's actually really helpful to be able to learn and adapt and hear from you. But I do want to clear up just one rumor that I've heard. No, I do not, in fact, have brain cancer or early onset dementia. For some reason, that's been going around, but I want to assure you that I don't, and that I'm fully able to serve the student body to the best of my ability. And since the very first moment I got to RPI, I've been doing just that. I've spent the last 4 years advocating for changes to the ARCH, improving COVID-19 policies, increasing food offerings, and increasing the hours of the dining halls, pushing for mental health resources, improving communication from the administration, creating a union weekly events email, working with alumni to create a platform for students and alumni to connect and network, and so much more. For the past 2 years, I've been the undergraduate president, fighting for you. And as Grand Marshal, I will continue to do just that. Even in just the last 2 weeks, I've spent any and all of my free time keeping the union alive, working with the director of the union to outline the union's hiring processes, helping class councils plan their final events of the year, developing plans to increase pedestrian safety, advocating for changes to the academic calendar, seeking student feedback about the ARCH, and so much more. But it's not just about what I've done, but what I will do. As Grand Marshal, I will ensure RPI's physical campus and resources are accessible to all, increase safety on and off campus, return power to students, advocate for mental health and changes to Title IX policies and training. I will ensure the dining halls are sanitary and dishes are clean, increase housing resources, advocate for the cost of parking tickets to be lowered. I will ensure the fraternity and sorority community is supported and recognized. I will foster an inclusive community that accepts and supports our underrepresented students, advocating for those underrepresented students and our multicultural organizations, women in the LGBTQ+ community, ensuring their voices are heard and recognized. But overall, I will fight for all students, for all voices, for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ria, for that fantastic opening statement. Allow me to introduce myself this time. My name is Vivian Rosnasan, and I am running for Grand Marshal. This is my second time standing, or sitting, before you, and I am incredibly grateful for this opportunity. Thank you to all who have spoken to me these past 4 weeks and have given me any fraction of your attention. Next year, I'm committed to being a member of the Senate and working to better RPI's community. Whether that be as Grand Marshal or as a committee member, I want to use whatever free time I have to work with RPI students and make your college experience positive. However, the simple reason I am running is because the place where I can have the most positive impact is as Grand Marshal. My commitment to RPI is not limited to a position, but I am the most qualified and experienced person to fill this role. I am riding the momentum from newly reopening Student-Senate relations with the Faculty Senate and collaborating to lower textbook costs by 30% for 4 intro courses. This will be my 3rd year in the Senate, and I have seen 2 very different GMs run the Senate, the good, the bad, and the complicated. I understand how the example set by the GM can affect inter-board and admin relationships. And speaking of complicated, there are too many hurdles and hoops that make accessing education at RPI difficult. As GM, I want to make sure you are all able to access your education and be present. This can be seen in improved pedestrian safety, improved disability services for all students, including those that are injured mid-year. We have seen student initiatives in these topics with the disabled students at RPI's No Stare Day and the Facility and Services Committee Accessibility Day and Walk, where we tested all of the wheelchair buttons on campus to make sure that they worked. The GM's role is to uplift these student voices and these student initiatives. I appreciate your time and effort in being here, and please consider submitting audience questions so that we know what is important to you all during this debate. Some important projects I would appreciate your feedback on include a proposed diversity, equity, and inclusion chair on the Senate to ensure multicultural involvement in Senate committees and administration initiatives, Additionally, a special project to improve transitions of international students to support more graduate students and allow more community building on campus. This would also work to support various communities on campus, as once a community is supported, all students are supported. I want to encourage Senate committee chairs to be actively engaged with identity-based and mission-oriented clubs to combine student efforts and form a unified union. Once again, thank you for being here, and I ask that you vote Vivian for GM on Wednesday and consider submitting questions today. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to move into general questions. I'm also going to ask if the audience could reduce the murmuring a little bit. The audio system is not the best for all the murmuring over the line. Starting with the first question. Vivian, you will go first. We're going to address the elephant in the room. We had a historic tithe of Grand Marshal this year. Why do you think that is? Do you think there's a dramatic split in the student body's opinion, or is it that you two are too similar to each other?
I don't think that we're similar. I think we are both great candidates that have a lot of experience in student government, and we have similar initiatives because there's a lot of things that can benefit the student body, and a lot of them can be accomplished by improving communication, working with administration, and just simple things like that. I think that the split vote is because we are two very qualified candidates, and there's various ways that someone can choose the best candidate, and there's various measures of what is seen to be as the best. Right? We've both spoken to different communities and been endorsed by various communities, and I think that that split in the student vote just shows an involved community and shows that people, have different opinions on what is the best and how they want to see our student government run in the future.
Yes, I want to echo some of what Vivian said. I don't think it's necessarily that we're too similar, but that we both are strong candidates, and both of us are actually very different and target very different communities on campus. Some of my initiatives focus a lot more on things like housing and dieting, Title IX, and mental health, while a lot more of Vivian's ideas focus on supporting academics and really getting accessibility and students involved. And so I think it's not necessarily that we are too similar of candidates, but that there are very different people that are voting for each of us. And so I think that is a lot of what led to this week, or 2 weeks ago, the tie.
Thank you. Both of you have extensive student government experience. Which existing student government project of yours do you think is the best example of what you'll be able to achieve as Grand Marshal for the benefit of the student body?
Yes, so I think a lot of my work actually with the Arch and the Arch Task Force would be exactly the best example of what I can do for the student body. So I have done a ton of different things to actually make the Arch better for students, including redoing the entire Arch prep course, getting more companies to come to campus, changing the Arch exemption policy, so it's now an Arch summer option, so students can now choose to do the Arch summer as if they find like an internship, study abroad, or something during that summer, instead of spending the normal away semester, along with a whole number of other things. And there's still a lot more in the works and things that are going on, but that would be the best example of the different sorts of things that once I take on a project, what I can do as Grand Marshal.
I think the best example of what I can do as Grand Marshal, as shown in my experience as the Academic Affairs Committee Chair on the Senate, was a current proposal that is with the Faculty Senate right now. In December, I sent out a survey to students talking about if you had any exams or assignments that were due after the last day of classes, your relationship with the Thanksgiving break, whether or not you attended class, and I got over 450 responses for that. And taking that into a proposal in combination with my work with the provost and different union administrations as well as different senators from the grad council and with different senators and people involved in the committee, taking that into that proposal and being in front of the Faculty Senate and presenting that with their support and moving that into an initiative to have that 5-day break for Thanksgiving and removing exams from immediately after a break, taking student feedback on a problem and transitioning that into a proposal, making sure that student feedback is heard and is active in those committees is an example of what I can do as Grand Marshal.
Continuing on the project theme, What is one specific, concrete project that is entirely within your power as Grand Marshal and that you promise will be completed by the end of your term?
Yes, so something that I already know is in the works, so I feel the most confident confirming that is going to be done at the end of my term, because even if something isn't done at the end of my term, something that I think I bring to the table is making sure that projects can be seen out after my term, as I will still be at RPI. So having that 5-day break and reorganizing the academic calendar, as Ria had mentioned, in accordance to making sure that art students are supported and making sure that the Student Senate is actually active over the summer break and making sure that the grad students and the students on art are supported and being recognized. So changes to that academic calendar are on the table right now, and also making sure that reading days are enforced and so that you guys have that break in between the end of classes and the start of finals to make sure that you guys can study for finals as well.
Yeah, the one thing I think is something I can absolutely promise will be done within my term as Grand Marshal is improving pedestrian safety. And so this is a huge issue. Within just the past 2 years, we've had a number of students that have been hit crossing the streets nearby campus, and there have been a couple different discussions in the works and projects underway, but the actual solutions that we've developed, the officers of the union in just the past few weeks or so, are to work with the city of Troy to put up no parking signs, not a huge ask, within 20 feet of those crosswalks, ensuring that there is visibility so you can see when people are crossing those streets, as well as putting up more street lamps right out in front of the Union, which if you've ever walked there at night is super dark, very interesting intersection to drive through, but ensuring that we can actually see people as they're crossing the streets. And there's a bunch more that will go into improving it, but those are definitely some of the things that can be accomplished within my term.
Moving into the slightly more spicy questions now. The Senate and Executive Board did not have a collaborative training program this year, as it did in previous years. In fact, the Senate actually didn't run a training program at all. Part of the Grand Marshal's role is to enable senators to advocate effectively. How do you plan to train senators, and how do you plan to engage with the Executive Board?
Yes, so that's a very loaded question. But for training senators, this is actually something I've done as the undergraduate president. It's been my responsibility to train each new freshman class council every year. And so there are a ton of resources for that, and I plan to do something similar with the Senate. Meeting with the full Senate, both as a board, to get to know one another, become comfortable with one another, also to go through the bylaws, make sure people know what the policies are, what they have available to them, and what they can do as senators, and then also making sure they have a little bit of fun, that they get to meet each other and interact. But I don't think that training is a one-time thing. It's something that should happen continuously throughout the year. There should be different sessions, and there's a lot of history and knowledge that can be passed on that hasn't really been in past years. And in terms of interacting with the e-board, I definitely think it's really important to actually have a training together like we used to a couple years ago with the executive board. And this is something that I plan to do within the first month should I be elected Grand Marshal.
Yeah, so speaking about past board bonding that has happened, 2 years ago we had a very successful one that I was lucky enough to attend as a freshman, where the executive board and the Senate were able to come together and talk about topics that we wanted to accomplish together. We had activities sponsored by the Archer Center and working into our leadership and communication skills, working together across boards and making sure people were interacting outside of that community of just student government and working together, making sure that we were working together in different ways. Even though we weren't able to attend the board training that was scheduled for this year, people just didn't have enough time in their schedule for that specific Saturday that it was scheduled. The previous GM did a really good job of making sure that freshmen, as they came in, they had access to the Google Drive and that they knew the bylaws and making sure that they knew what they could be successful in as a senator. And I want to build on the framework from the past 2 years and make sure that we attend that training and are interacting with eBoard, but also making sure that as people join the Senate, that they are being successful and they understand their roles and their commitments. So thank you.
Why should voters listen to the organizations that endorse you and not the organizations that endorsed your opponent?
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Why should voters listen to the organizations that endorse you and not the organizations that endorsed your opponent?
And not the organizations that endorse it? Okay. So I think the people should listen to the organizations that have endorsed me, not simply because they just are organizations that support people, but because they are different types of student voices. We have people from the Greek side represented by the Panhellenic Senator, by the Panhellenic Council, sorry, Senate is just in my mind right now, and then people on the news side that are supposed to be completely objective, and the Polytechnic, where all candidates submitted their packets, and then they interviewed each of us in a long, very stressful 30-minute interview. And so they had the objective view of being able to sit down with all candidates and listen to their point of view and having that background knowledge of how people have worked with the Senate, and also different committees also, as the past Grand Marshal has endorsed me, and he has the best point of view of how that council works and how the Senate interacts and who is the best to take up that position. And for people that endorse them, and RIA, that's 30 seconds.
Yeah, so the organizations that have endorsed me are organizations that are actively working on some of the initiatives that I want to focus on as Grand Marshal, including Active Minds, the disability students at RPI, the autism at RPI, Soul Survivors, as well as COMMA and the Interfraternity Council. And so a lot of these organizations are focused on disability, mental health, Title IX, and sexual assault awareness. And so these are initiatives that I really want to focus on and have included as part of the things I wish to accomplish as Grand Marshal. And as such, that is why you should listen to these organizations, because they understand what goes into advocating for these specific policies, because that's exactly what they do. And their entire clubs are dedicated to it. And so I, as Grand Marshal, will be partnering with these organizations and like-minded groups to actually form a mental health committee that can do a lot of different initiatives that way.
We're now going to move on to what I assume is the candidate's least favorite section, which is targeted questions. Ria, in your platform, you mentioned several project ideas, such as soliciting input from students about unsafe or inaccessible locations on campus, and having the off-campus commons offer direct assistance for apartment searches. These services already exist in some form. The off-campus commons in particular report very low uptake of its services, despite copious advertising. Were you aware of these existing incentives? And if so, what about them do you think is inadequate?
Yes, so I was aware of these existing incentives and initiatives that have been going on. Specifically for accessibility, there are a whole bunch of different organizations that are actually working right now. I know there's actually a whole project going on that students are putting together a report in terms of accessible locations on campus. And so really what I mean by that is combining all of these different initiatives that a number of different organizations separately are working on together to come up with one concrete proposal of all of the places on campus that are most inaccessible. In terms of the off-campus commons, they're actually really new. And so while they do have some resources and they've done a couple different events, they don't have resources themselves. They outsource a lot of it. They don't even have a list on there of what you should ask when you go and you tour an apartment or all of the different places off campus that students typically live, just general areas. And so putting a lot of that information and having RPI sponsor that and go through specific to our school and our location is super important.
Vivian, many of the components of your platform are simply continuations of existing projects or goals that have already been accomplished, including lowering textbook costs or removing exam deadlines right after spring break. Do you have specific ideas that depart from your predecessor?
Yeah, so the reason that they're part of my campaign is because they are initiatives that I brought to the Student Senate and that I want to continue into my term. And they're projects that are not finished and are not where they should end, right? And so the important part of having transitions between GMs and between boards on student government is that a lot of the initiatives end when that person leaves. And so having those part of my campaign is ensuring that that work that one person has, it does not end when they leave RPI, right? So expanding textbook costs and making sure that courses, even with textbooks that are already adapted to have lower textbook costs, are applied to different classes, right? So Physics 1, Physics 2, Calc 1 to Calc 2, stuff like that, and expanding the project and making sure that more classes are involved. And so in the exam deadlines, that is something that isn't going to be finished within my predecessor's term. And so making sure that that is a top priority and while it's on people's mind is important for that campaign, and making sure that is seen through. So I think it's important to continue those projects. The light goes off, but Gabe, okay.
Rhea. If elected, you'll be a graduate student during most of your term, and you've committed to appointing a PhD student as your Vice Grand Marshal. However, grad students make up less than a quarter of the Rensselaer student body. Are you pandering to the graduate vote, and how will you protect against minority rule?
Yeah, so I actually expected this question to come up. But one thing that's actually really unique is that I have a graduate student in mind who actually did his undergrad here, and he's unfortunately not here tonight, but both of us have done our undergrad here, and now both of us will be grad students. Therefore, we both understand what it will be like, or what it is like to be an undergrad in the undergraduate experience, but also what it is like to be a graduate student. And so I think that makes it almost even better that both of us will be graduate students, having been undergraduate students, because we'll understand it from both perspectives, which is something that I think is super important in a Grand Marshal, in an elected leader who's supposed to represent the entire student body.
Keeping with our theme about graduate students, Vivian. During the last debate, you mentioned that you have worked with the Graduate Council to make sure grad voices are heard. Can you further elaborate on what you have worked with the Graduate Council and what you have worked with the Graduate Council outside of Senate on?
Oh, what I have worked on in the past, or what I will do in the future?
What you've worked on in the past with Senate and outside of Senate.
Okay, so I will admit I haven't worked too much with the Graduate Council outside of Senate. Because most of my academic work has been through Senate. But in the future, I want to work, going off of what Rhea said, and working to have graduate students' voices on the Senate. And while in talking to the Graduate Council, I've talked about my commitment to making sure that those graduate voices are heard, I do not want to yet say that I'm confirmed to have a graduate student as my vice provost, because I think it's not vice provost, vice grand marshal. Gosh, because I think it's important to allow anyone who wants to be in that role to apply to that role and talk about their experience, and whether or not that's a senior or a different co-term student or someone that's just here for their master's rather than a PhD. I think allowing people that chance to submit and fulfill that position and talk about their goals, I think is important as well. I'd like to use my green card for this as well. I think it's important going forward for the grad student to not see us as two completely separate bodies on this thing going on the amendment coming up this time, as it wasn't there last time, of ensuring that the graduate president is the spokesperson for the graduate student body and making sure that they're invited to all those spaces, and making sure that I am not speaking on behalf of the graduate students, because obviously I'm not a graduate student. But I do have a lot of graduate student experience in my life, as my sister is a PhD student, and this past summer and currently in my research, I'm working with PhD students. So even outside of Senate, I want to make sure that I'm interacting with graduate students and going to events, whether it's the family days on campus, and making sure that I'm interacting with you guys and supporting your events, and making sure that my interactions in my upcoming year do not just end with Senate, and supporting the Graduate Council and their efforts.
Rhea, diverging from the graduate student theme, the Common Party is ostensibly 8 candidates running under one banner. Is the Common Party a policy-driven organization, or is it merely the party of Rhea?
No, so the Common Party is an entire group of us that are dedicated to improving the experience with one common goal in mind: promoting an inclusive governance. And so it's not just a party of me, although I am running for the highest elected position, meaning that I do tend to be the most public member of the Common Party, but there's actually a number of different people that are involved outside of student government and are not just candidates running in the election. And so it's a group of us that all want to work together and that all have similar ideas and goals, but differ in some aspects, which makes for a nice collective group spanning from freshmen all the way up through PhD students to actually be able to discuss things and work towards that one goal together.
Yeah, so I would like to respond to this in saying that do not worry about being part of a party if you are interested in joining student government. I don't want that to be seen as a barrier to entering student government, that you have to be part of this group or recognized for your initiatives within that department. I think that regardless if your values include just improved communication, improving the RPI experience, that you should be just able to run for whatever position you'd like, with the whole support of the student government, as EC's efforts have been just to get more candidates on the ballots and making sure that that process is as easy as possible. Obviously, you can't do that anymore, but there's so many open positions on Senate and as class reps and just on committees that are open to the public. So just if you're interested at all, please look into joining those committees and just looking to maybe just attend a meeting and making sure that being part of a party or association with a party is not seen as a barrier to entering student government as a whole.
Vivian, during the last debate, you seemed to dodge a question regarding your plans to remain active on campus during your RPI semester. Would it be prudent to elect a GM who will have to step away from her post for a semester? Do you have plans to ensure that the Senate will function well while you're away?
Yeah, I don't think I dodged it. It's just that I don't know because I don't have, my arch plans are not solidified yet. I'm just waiting to go through that process. I don't think, regardless of whether I'm arch away, whether I'm on campus, or if I'm on campus but not an arch student, whether I'm doing research because my grant is specific to the summer, I can't give a definitive answer, so I'm not dodging it in any way. But you guys can look at my poly interview if you're interested in my answer for that as well. But I think there's steps now that the amendment has passed and is instituted that the Senate will be able to function properly while they're not here. And for people that aren't on campus, the Senate has functioned properly without someone on campus. And I don't think that's the best, because when people step away for that summer semester, usually we have a sleeping Senate, and then the students on campus are not fully represented. So I think it is important that whether I'm here or not, we have a functioning Senate, and I will do my best to do that.
Yeah, so I myself was on my RPI semester last spring as the undergraduate president, and I ran things virtually. And while I did do that, I definitely would not recommend it, especially for the highest elected student official. They're someone that's supposed to be a representative of every single person. And while this worked for the undergraduate council and our needs, because class councils were already trained and we don't focus on as many of the advocacy issues that the Grand Marshal does, I really encourage everyone to think about whether you want a Grand Marshal that's going to be here for the entire term or one that isn't sure yet if they will be here, because being Grand Marshal, being present physically on campus is part of the role, part of the duties of the Grand Marshal.
And you can both have a sigh of relief. We're over the targeted questions and into the lightning round. Same as last time, there will be 30 seconds to answer each question, and Q will be the same. How do you pitch yourself to Moose voters who won't have that option in the runoff?
Yes, so what I'll say to the Moose voters is that you should definitely take a look at our platform. So we're not just, an animal. However, I am running alongside the Common Party, which does promote inclusive governance, which stands for pig. So if you are a fan of the animals, we do have pigs.
Yeah, I think I relate to the Moose, and I encouraged him and enjoyed his presence very much during the election, as I think it brought a joy and an involvement to the student body that we haven't not seen in the past years, at least while I've been here. And I want to build off of what he's had by making sure that student government is engaging with the students, right? And so that means committee chairs are talking to other clubs on campus that are doing that work and making sure that meetings are public and making sure that it is fun and we're not just holding bonding events for senators, but also making sure that people are together.
Keeping with the animal theme, if you could turn into any animal, what animal and why?
Probably a dog, so I could stay best friends with my current dog.
A duck, because anyone who knows me knows I absolutely love them. I don't have my phone on me, but if you look at it over there, my entire phone screen is a duck, and I have like 6 duck stuffed animals back in my apartment.
Last debate, we had a bit of a color theme during the fun questions. We're just going to briefly revisit that. In the last debate, we asked each of you what your least favorite color is. What did your opponent say is her least favorite color? No helping.
Oh, that's a good question. I've watched over the debate, and I should remember, because I remember seeing it. I feel like it was either brown or orange, but I don't remember which.
Yeah, I was gonna say yours was brown, but was it yellow? Gray? Oh, gray. Mine was orange. So
I got it. Yeah.
you were close, but someone else said brown.
Oh.
Maybe. I don't know. They all,
Joseph, I see him waving in the back there. That's who said brown.
you can see that far back. I just see a bright light.
One more color question. If you could paint the entire facade of the Union a single color, what color would it be? This may be within your powers, Grand Marshal, or not. The EC does not say.
The entire inside of the Union.
The entire facade.
I don't know. I like blue, but there's already a lot of blue. So yeah, exactly, precisely. You know, maybe a little pink to go around, bring some joy.
Yeah, I'd have to say RPI red. I used to know the exact hex code. I'm on the union marketing team and do the graphic design, and I wish I remembered it right now because it'd be the perfect moment, but that exact color.
Today, the Web Technologies Group announced to much fanfare Evening Mail, a new daily companion to the clearly universally beloved morning mail. What will you do to expand the clearly lacking quantity of daily mail services on our campus?
No, I actually already did that. I created a weekly email list that goes out to send upcoming events because we don't have a place to post all of the events and see what goes on every week. So I actually did expand that a little bit. And I love the joke, though, of a nice evening mail to summarize everything that goes on daily because, you know, we don't get enough emails.
Yeah, I think definitely continuing what Rhea has started with the clubs and initiatives, but making sure that there's also ways for people to resubscribe to the morning mail if their freshman year decided they didn't want to, or set different settings. Like if we can allow clubs to submit those events and then allow people to just submit to the club events, you know, making life a little bit less complicated so you don't have to be checking a bunch of different emails, but you can just subscribe in a certain way and then get the emails that you would like.
One last question. This question might make some enemies today. Both of you endorsed by one of the Greek councils, and the Greeks on campus are an important part of the campus ecosystem. Which Greek organizations hosts the most fun events, and which hosts the worst? Good luck.
I know, I have to start. Okay. Gosh, either way, some of my teammates are gonna get on me for this later. But since I've been to more Panhell events, but I heard the MSFC events lately, this past week, were really fun, so I have to go with those.
Which one's the worst?
Oh. Sure, we'll go with that. You said that leaves IFC, and I said we'll go with that.
Yeah, that's a very tough question. I don't want to call anyone the worst, but I will say I was on Panhell, and I did plan some of the Panhell events while I was on Panhell, so I feel like if I say that was the worst, that's probably not the best, but I don't know what's the worst. I feel like there's a lot of different events that go on, and I know right now is actually MSC's week, and they're doing a week-long set of events, so I definitely think they're pretty good too. But at the same time, IFC has put on a ton of great events. They just had their St. Baldrick's event, actually donating money, a ton of different people, yeah, shave their heads. I could see John back there who got his shaved head. Oh, my time's up, sorry.
Okay, and with that, the first half of debate is going to be over. We're going to take a short break, as is our format. That'll give you a chance to breathe. Please, everyone, if you haven't already, take advantage of the free food that a lot of people took advantage to, and take the opportunity to submit your questions to the Google form. We've gone through most of the normal questions already, and after the break, we'll be going through most of the audience questions. And we're back. We have a list of vetted audience questions from the Google form, and we will be asking live questions taken from the audience. Alex will be up here, and you can approach him with your live questions. We'll start off with a vetted question. Diversity is paramount at any institution, but even with progress made, RPI still has a need for representation, inclusions, and policies that support underrepresented student groups. How can you best serve Black and minority students, and are you qualified to make decisions on policy affecting them?
Sorry, we were deciding who went first. Thank you for the question. Yeah, this is a very important question that was both asked at last debate and in a conversation that both Rhea and I had at the Caribbean Student Association. And so I think it's very important to support DEI initiatives in the Senate itself, as well as outside of the Senate. And so creating a diversity, equity, and inclusion chair, and making sure that they are involved with making sure that committees are on track in supporting minority groups, as well as engaging with minority groups, is paramount to improving that voice. And right now I'm also working to make sure that in certain grants and in, Gabe moved places, in different places as well, that those voices are heard and that they're involved in committees that might not necessarily reach out to the groups as individuals, and acting as that connection between the student and the group, between administration and the group, and making sure that they're invited to spaces where decisions are being made, and making sure that people are working to elevate their voices as well.
Yes, I definitely agree with Vivian that this is a really important question. Given that I am white, I don't feel like I am necessarily the one voice for all of our minority students. However, being Grand Marshal, it is the job to represent all students. And so what that actually means is that when issues come up, or even just every month, I plan to actually meet with our multicultural organizations to hear directly from them what issues they're facing and what supports they want, what they want to see. And so because I'm not a minority, it's a lot harder for me to sometimes, acknowledge or realize that these are issues. And so it's imperative to actually meet with them, especially with the Multicultural Leadership Council, who actually is a committee that has a seat on the Senate currently, but I would like to actually increase representation of our minority students and potentially even create a minority senator position specifically to uplift the voices of that community and provide that availability for them to represent and speak on their own behalf.
Alex, do we have any live audience questions? I see one over there.
One moment.
Oh.
Hello. Rhea, you mentioned you've already picked a vice GM. Historically, student-wide applications for that position are open to, quote, promote inclusive governance, end quote. Why don't you plan on doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's not necessarily that I fully decided and committed. I still plan to open up applications and have applications for all of the positions. There's more than just a vice GM. However, I do think it's really important that we have representation from a graduate student, specifically because we haven't had actually a Grand Marshal that has been a PhD student in a very long time, and there's only been one. And so that is why I've committed to appointing a PhD student. And while yes, I do have someone in mind, that's not to say that I'm fully set on that one person, because I do think that student government should be inclusive. And there's a number of different ways that other people can get involved as well, including all the different committees, class councils, and uplifting those voices and empowering people to do and work on the projects that they're most passionate about is what I think is most important in terms of making student government more inclusive and creating those positions for everyone.
Taking another question from the Google form. This question is for both candidates. Do you believe that RPI administration has previously overstepped in its role within the union? Do you think it's still doing so? And do you believe that the role of the RPI administration within the union should be more like a manager or a supervisor? Vivian can go first.
Okay. I thought we were switching. It's fine. So I would say in my experiences with the union administration, they've been helpful in promoting my ideas and being that connection between administration and students. I do feel like having that role be within the union administration takes away the power of the Grand Marshal as being that connection between the administration and the students. And so while I appreciate their efforts, I do think that acknowledgement that it is student priority and being a student ambassador, that the Grand Marshal is seen in that position. And I think going forward, between a manager and a supervisor, I think that the union student workers act semi as just aides in the office, but that the administration also work to just help students as well, but may overstep at times when they do not necessarily understand the boundaries that different boards have set.
Yeah, I definitely do think there have been times where both the administration and the union administration have overstepped. That being said, it is the Grand Marshal's responsibility and student government as a whole to fight for student powers. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the Save the Union protest and everything that happened back then, so won't get into that. But we are still returning. We still don't have all of the power and authority that we used to. And there are a number of different things that we can actually do and a number of things we have the power to do. But we don't have a student representative on the Board of Trustees Finance Committee. We used to up until 2008, but then that was removed. And also, there is an interesting transition going on right now with student life now moving under the provost's office. And so what that means is that we can actually redefine our relationship and ensure that students are on all of the administrative committees relating to them. One great example is with the Arch. There's an Arch working group committee that meets every week. We don't have a student representative on that, and so pushing for student voices to be physically present in those meetings is very important. And while, yes, the director of the union and the union administration do work directly with the students, and they've done a fabulous job of doing so, there are always going to be times where students can't be present, and they are responsible for advocating and speaking for students based off of what the students have told them. And so I think it's definitely important to work on the relationship both between student government and the union administration, and also beyond that between student government and the administration as a whole, because we as students should have the power to speak up, to represent ourselves, and to make our own voices heard.
Now we'll take a question from the audience.
To either Grand Marshal candidate, RPI is notoriously bad at disseminating certain important timely information, such as when the shuttles, for example, are taken offline due to bad weather. I personally have been told that the drivers are meant to contact certain people, these certain people are supposed to contact RPI, and this information is supposed to be disseminated via RPI alerts. So far, I have yet to receive any RPI alert for anything other than police activity. How will you plan to use your position to ensure that students can be made aware of this kind of information regardless?
Yeah, so I think that's actually a really important question. And I will say I wasn't aware of so many, I know there's been issues with the shuttles in the past, but in terms of communicating, this is something I've actually spoken to the president, Dr. Schmidt, about in terms of creating an email list specifically for that sort of important information. As many of you might know, there's also been an issue where parking fines have suddenly increased and there's a lot higher enforcement of them. And this wasn't communicated to students until after it had already gone into effect. And so in issues, in certain instances like that, there should be a system that they can actually notify you. Public safety does also have RPI alerts. Those could be used for those circumstances, like you mentioned with the shuttles, where they're maybe taken off of one of the loops, and then you can't actually get to where you need to get to, and you're waiting for a long time. And so I think it's definitely super important, and it's actually a large conversation that we've had with Dr. Schmidt and Dr. George, the provost, to ensure that the administration is communicating. But as Grand Marshal, I would push for that to increase further.
Yeah, great question. As someone that lives in Blitman and was here over spring break and didn't know that the shuttles were still running, I completely relate to your question. The times that shuttles are running, when they arrive, and when they actually have a schedule, if they do, that's not really given to students or promoted to students, and making sure that people have a way to get where they need to go, especially for people that live up or down on campus and can't get to Fathers if that's the only thing that's open, or can't get to Panera, they can't get to their classes, stuff like that is very important. And so, as Ria mentioned before in previous questions, student life transitioning under the provost office allows us to have an opportunity to actually condense a lot of information and make sure a lot of information is in one place and that there is an improved system of communication. And so using RPI alert or using a different format, so it's not just, oh, this is when I get a text when something bad happens, but it's just a shuttle running, but making sure that people have access to that information if they use the parking and enforcement, the parking email that goes to all the students on campus, or just information in general using the RPI alert as well.
We're now going to take a question live from the Google form. 1 second while I open up the Google form. For both candidates, spicy question. The current GM has come under fire at the last Senate meeting. Is it right for the GM to endorse a candidate? And if not, will you commit to not doing it?
So I believe I'm first on this one. And yeah, this was also brought up in the last debate. While it can be seen as was last in the last debate as a form of clickiness and just putting someone in that position, I don't think that is outside of the GM's bounds to endorse the candidate, as they are the person currently in the position. They are most used to the position and knowing what it takes to fill that position. They can see that in a candidate that they endorse. And also, it isn't the first time that an officer of the union has endorsed the next person in that position in a contested race. And I don't think that it'll be the last. I will most likely not do it, as I think it has enforced this this sense of clickiness. And like I mentioned with the parties, I don't want anyone to feel like there's any barrier for them to joining student government, but I do not think that is without the GM's rights to do that.
What I will say that is different about a Grand Marshal endorsing a candidate versus other officers of the union is that the Grand Marshal is an ex officio member of all Senate committees. The Elections Commission is a committee under the Student Senate, thereby meaning that the Grand Marshal technically is a member of the Elections Commission. And so while it doesn't matter who the Grand Marshal endorses, I think it's wrong no matter what for someone who is supposed to be involved in the elections process when necessary, such as in a case of a tie, that's super unprecedented. And I know the Elections Commission has done a great job to ensure that they themselves have remained unbiased, but it's very problematic for that specific person to endorse a candidate, no matter who that candidate is. And so I 100% commit that should I be Grand Marshal, I will not endorse a candidate, because I think student government should be open to everyone and that the elections themselves should be unbiased and fair.
Now a live audience question.
Hi there. I guess my question is about, my question is about the effects of student government and the RPI community to the broader Troy community. What do you think student government's role is in collaborating with local government officials or local units, local community, and pushing for what they want or what they need? Please don't say Community Affairs Committee, because there's currently no one there.
Yeah, so I was actually going to start off with the fact that there actually is no chair of the Community Relations Committee, which is a committee on the Student Senate that should be such a huge influence in making sure that student government is involved not only here within RPI, but also the broader campus. And I think there are a number of different issues that it's actually really important that we partner with the city of Troy, that we partner with the local governments. One example of this, I know I've mentioned before, is with the pedestrian safety issue. RPI doesn't own the roads, the city of Troy does. And so having a dedicated committee chair and dedicated committee that works with these people and develops these relationships beforehand, it would be super beneficial. And so yes, I think it's very important. And it's something we don't currently utilize enough of, and there's a number of different issues like that where it would be great to actually have a community relations chair. Beyond that, just actually having different community events and things open to the community as well are some of the other responsibilities that I think are super important to actually bring back to the Student Senate.
Yeah, so building off of the Community Relations Committee, this year was the first year that I'd actually seen it used, and we actually got a meeting with some of the mayoral candidates, which is pretty epic because people that live here are in registered Troy voters. They got to meet with their candidates, and they got to meet with people that they're going to vote for, just like you guys are now. And so having someone in that position enables people that go to RPI not to just see RPI as their community, but to see all of Troy as their community, and to empower those people that are living off campus or in Blitman downtown or even further downtown, in some of the fraternities or just in off-campus housing down there, people that are here for 7 years with their PhD students, being involved in the community and interacting with those people on campus and off campus, and empowering projects like pedestrian safety and just safety overall on campus and off campus, as we take the buses, we walk to Walmart, we walk to McDonald's, we go off campus and we are interacting with that community, and so we should interact with that community in a formal way as well.
Let's take another live audience question.
All right. Hi guys, this is Sasha. So one thing I've learned about the elections that are not as fun as the U.S. government, the student government elections, but the U.S. elections, is that there are swing states. In every swing state, I think the best description was that the candidates came every 4 years, flying in, promise them the moon, then get the hell out, and never see it to be seen again in the next 4 years. So, not to be saying that this is happening in student government, but the Graduate Council has been promised also a lot of things in the past, by previous GMs, and I know of knowledge that some of the promises have not been followed through because the GM then said, well, I had other priorities in my mind. So with that in mind, what assurances, beside your word, can you give that you will follow up in your commitment and what you have said in your work towards the graduate community at RPI during your term?
Yes, thank you, Sasha, for that question. And that's something I've been hearing a lot while campaigning, is like, we go to groups and we interact with them, and we try to get I've been trying to get their opinions on what they think the GM should be and how they think the GM should interact in the communities, and making sure that my campaign and my goals for my year as GM is not just what I think I should accomplish, but other groups want to see accomplished. And I think I've been very good about being transparent that while I cannot confirm anything, and I've been working my best to say not 100%, because I want to work to do my best, and I don't want to make you promises that can't be fulfilled. And so I want to work with groups, and I want to work with the Graduate Council to make sure that those goals are being met. And that's not just having someone on the Senate, that it's their job to represent graduate councils, it's also my job to represent graduate students, right? It's my job to interact with you and to work with you guys, and making sure that I'm doing that is on me, and I want to make sure that I'm holding myself to that standard as well.
Yeah, thank you, Sasha, for that question. I think it's really important that we note that, while we are going to try to accomplish as much as we can as possible during our term, there will be things that are going to go beyond our term that can't be accomplished in just 1 year. But that being said, I am committed to ensure that the graduate voice is represented specifically, because I know that's what you lead as the Graduate Council. And by having a Vice Grand Marshal that is a PhD student, I think that in and of itself will help ensure that the graduate issues and voices are heard on the Student Senate, which I know has been an issue in the past. In terms of all of the other things that I'd like to work on for graduate students, advocating for the stipend, creating safe spaces for graduate students to meet and discuss. Those are things that are definitely actionable and can be done within my term, and I promise that I will work on them. And there's going to be things too that maybe we can't always accomplish, but I do actually think it's really important that a summary document be published to hold the Grand Marshal accountable for all of the things they said they would like to do, but were unable to.
As we've got 3 more questions queued up in the audience, let's go to a live audience question.
So, Ria, you mentioned you're working with specific student projects on accessibility solutions. Do you know when you plan on bringing those solutions to administration after those classes finish? Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, can you repeat the question? I just didn't hear all of it.
So you mentioned you're working with specific student projects on accessibility solutions. Do you know when you plan on bringing those solutions to administrations when those class projects finish?
Yes, so while I don't have a definitive date set in stone, based off of when those classes end and when the report is drafted, we actually have monthly student leaders meetings with the president and the provost where we bring up these issues. And so that's one place where I can mention and sort of get the ball rolling. However, I want to schedule a meeting once the full report from those projects and from all of the different clubs and organizations focused on it have had a chance to actually come up with and develop their full project proposals. And so once those are developed, I want to schedule a meeting, invite all of them to come and bring those ideas, present them, and speak for themselves. I know some of the groups, there's a few people that are working on it that are graduating, so they might not be able to, but my goal is to have that as soon as possible, which realistically, given that the projects may not be finished till the end of the semester, could be at the start of the next fall semester. However, we do meet with the president and provost, and I think it's important to bring those things up before the fall semester and throughout the summer.
Go to another audience question.
Hey, yeah, so quick question. You know how when you actually try to do things, you get a lot of pushback from administration? In terms of things like shuttles and safe ride and other issues that benefit students but aren't exactly priorities for the school body, how do you intend to provide tangible changes for those beyond just lip service and, oh, we're trying our best?
Yeah, thank you. So tangible solutions are always the priority, right? You can't be held accountable to a promise or a wish or I'm going to try my best, right? You can only be held accountable, so this is what it's going to be done and this is how I'm going to do it. And so it's important for me, at least as an individual, to not make a promise without knowing the full scope of those issues. And so I would want to make sure that I'm meeting with those groups of students that are affected and people that are already working on the problem, like for Shuttle Tracker, obviously, which is an ARCOS group and an ARCOS project, and making sure that I'm knowing what has been tried, what pushback has already been received, to make sure that those next steps forward are not necessarily what's been repeated, but building off of those, building off of the responses that have been given, and saying, hey, you said this was promised to us, it hasn't been done, holding administration accountable to their problems, and maybe just demonstrating how it affects the local community and making, this isn't just one-off decision, but you're affecting social life, you're affecting accessibility, and you're affecting all these students, and making sure that those voices are heard.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And it is hard to actually ensure that everything that we want to accomplish and say we will does end up happening, just given the nature of all of the different projects and things going on. However, I think the most important thing in that is being transparent about what we're doing. Our meetings every week, our current agendas and minutes are not really publicly available anywhere. If anyone's noticed, the Student Senate doesn't publish their minutes in the public box, so no one really knows what happens at the Senate meetings, or that they don't even know that people are working on these different projects unless someone that they know mentions it or talks about it even more. And so I think being transparent and working on the projects, but also talking about what you're doing, the exact meetings you went to it for, and explaining and inviting those students who are passionate about it to come to those meetings and speak at them is super important to ensure that while maybe we can't accomplish every single thing we want to, there is some transparency, people know what's happening, and it is continued within the next year when the next Senate takes things up.
We have 2 more questions in the audience questions section. To keep to time, I'm going to ask that you each have 30 seconds to respond to these 2 audience questions, 30 seconds each. Ask the timekeeper adjust accordingly. Alex, first question.
Funny enough, my question actually does relate, again, to transparency. As an undergraduate student who has tried to gather both election and individual candidate information, I found it surprisingly difficult to, 1, discover that the union elections website actually existed, and 2, gather any information besides what was directly posted there. This problem exists for many other scenarios, such as subscribing to any public union mailing list. Will you make it a priority to address this general issue regarding both transparency and a difficulty to, and I will emphasize this, find relevant information during your term?
Yes, 100%. That's something that I've been pushing for this entire time as undergraduate president and plan to continue as Grand Marshal. I think it's really important that we are transparent. And so there is a union membership email list that students can actually receive that the Grand Marshal can send to and send all of the information there. And while I know, yes, another email, it is one place that information can be sent. In terms of finding information, we should have things publicly posted within the union. We should have signs on where you can find this information, posters, they can be on the TVs even, because sorry, my time's up.
Yes, that's a very good question. I think our Student Government Communications Committee has been doing a very good job of updating the Senate website as well, and making sure that the box link of where our minutes are or the public Google Drive that students can have access to are posted on that website and that it's active with our projects that we're working on. The Graduate Council does a very good job of updating their page and making sure that the projects that they're working on and the information that they receive from administration is public on there, and so modeling the undergraduate progress on that and making sure that that's accessible. And
One final question, apparently from Sasha.
All right. Okay, pointed question. So one question for each candidate instead of one collective one. So to Ria, number one is you mentioned that you want to give the power back to students. What do you mean by power, and where do you want the union to go from there? Number two, for Vivian, you mentioned that you work with different GMs, the good and the complicated. Who were the complicated GMs?
Since that was the first question, I'll go first. So by giving power back to the students, I mean giving voice back to the students, making sure that students are represented on all the administrative boards, are involved in all of the decision-making processes, and not just heard, but actually considered in that process, ensuring that we have representation, ensuring that students within the union have the decisions within an ability to make the decisions for the union, which isn't something that has fully happened ever since the Save the Union issues. And so, oh, time's up.
I would not say any of the GMs were complicated. I would say any situation where you're battling a bunch of people in a room, whether it be private or open, and just tackling difficult issues across student bodies is complicated. And when you bring an administration into that, it gets even more complicated. And when you bring in all of that being publicized and actually being enacted is also making it more complicated. And so balancing to make sure that student rights are a priority and making sure that any of those other things are not complicating that we are advocating for student rights.
Thank you for all of our audience questions. We're going to wrap it up with one closing question. Same closing question we had last time, actually, and arguably the most important question as student leaders. Does the student government have any real power to make change? Why doesn't it feel like it?
Okay, so it sucks that it doesn't feel like it. That is a very professional and technical term, if anyone was wondering. It does suck, but we are working on it, and we do have power. We are actively in this transition between presidents and between administration reorganizing itself. Wait, do I have 30 seconds or a minute for this one? 1 minute, okay, fantastic. Making sure that students are in those rooms where it's been happening, even if it's not just a room in the Board of Trustees, it's boards on committees, it's in task force where grant money is being used, it's making sure that students are in those rooms and their perspectives are being held up, and making sure that it's not necessarily students that have to enact the change, but administration is willing to make that change on behalf of student views, and making sure that that is clear and that students are allowed to be students and have fun, and they're not worried about being the only people that are advocating for bettering their experience, but that administration and staff and faculty are on the same page, and making sure that that is where that connection lies, and the power is in that connection between everyone that's in that room, and the motivation of the people that enter those rooms and the entire union as a whole.
Yeah, so even though I say that I am fighting to bring power back to the students, I do believe we have a lot of power. And a lot of the reason it doesn't feel like it is because we don't really advertise it too well. We don't really talk about all of our accomplishments as a student government and all of the things that we've done throughout the year. And I myself am not the best all the time at doing that. And I'll be honest with it, but I think that being open and transparent about that and actually publishing, even if it's just once a month, what we've done and what we've worked on, our big accomplishments, will make it feel a lot better, like student government students actually do have the power to change things. One of the biggest examples I can give is actually during the Arch summer semester, I was on the Facilities and Services Committee, and they wanted broader dining hall hours. And so we sent an email to Mike Ramella, asked him, hey, students have classes at 8 a.m. Can we open the dining halls at 7:30? And he did. And so it's something as simple as that you don't even realize you have the power to do and can do as a student. And so I think advertising and promoting that a whole lot better will make it feel like you do have that power.
Okay, that marks the end of our question section. Real quick, same as last time, just so we help with the tension, I'm going to ask you both to say something nice about your opponent. However, this time it should be something nice new since the tie election.
Vivian, it's actually been really nice working with you and hearing a different perspective. I know we actually had a meeting last week with Dr. Potts discussing some changes to the academic calendar, and both of us took had very different ideas on it, but it's really nice and refreshing to hear that and to hear things from a different point of view, and so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm going to pull from that same meeting that we had, that the conversation didn't end right when the meeting ended. We continued to work on that and make sure that we are on the same page with the Academic Affairs Committee and the Arch Task Force, and making sure that going forward our efforts are combined, even though that was a Senate thing and then it was a UC thing, and now it's complicated, as we said. It gets very complicated. But making sure that our efforts are combined and that we are on the same page, and that we both wanted the best for the students, and making sure that any student is present in the conversation when it involves the academic calendar.
Now you get the chance to make closing statements. 1 minute 30, I believe? Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple months ago, I decided to run for Grand Marshal because I recognized a number of these large problems that we're facing. Ones that haven't been solved by the new administration are still issues that student government has tried again to address, and a number of different other things. Ones that can really only be solved by consistent effort and advocacy, by someone who has the knowledge, institutional and within student government, the experience and drive to do so. And I believe that I am just that. With a passion for advocacy, extensive experience in 4 years in student government, and a proven dedication to the student body, I'm committed to fostering impactful and meaningful change to improve our collective experience. As Grand Marshal, should I be elected, I will ensure an accessible and inclusive community, increase campus safety, return power to the students, create resources for mental health, academics, underrepresented students, graduate students, and much more. And overall, I promise that I will fight for all students, for all voices, for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you guys once again for having us and listening and engaging with us. It's been fantastic hearing student point of view of what's important for you guys and what you guys want to see out of a leader and what issues are right on your to-do list. And if I were to GM, if I were to GM, as if it is a verb, if I were to be GM, I want to make sure that I'm keeping that connection and engaging with students, whether that's meeting with clubs or holding GM office hours, and making sure that once a week at a different time every week, because class schedules change, well, they're consistent, but your free time is always full as an RPI student. But making sure that I'm accessible as Grand Marshal, but also just making sure that all our meetings are made public, and making sure that I'm engaging with students, whether or not be the capstone projects that are working on pedestrian safety, whether that's different minority clubs or different other mission-oriented clubs as well on campus like Sunrise, and making sure that the student government is representing those missions and those efforts, and making sure that the efforts that different committees are putting forth is not just based on the committee chair and their passions, but making sure that they're elevating voices. And so I would ask that you guys vote Vivian for GM, for someone that is a new perspective in the student government, and making sure that it's someone that is still in touch with the student body and actively engaged in different student groups on campus, and has committed herself to making herself open to students and actively engage with the student body continuously throughout her term. And so thank you for having us.
And with that, our debate is over. Hopefully for good this time. Some quick reminders from the Elections Commission before we leave. First of all, go vote on Wednesday. Polling is going to be in the same locations as last time, and I'm also proud to announce we will have 6 additional computers, so there shouldn't be any lines this time. There's also going to be a special once-of-a-kind piece of merch to commemorate the runoff. You don't want to miss it. Hopefully we never have to release it again. Second, I'm also going to ask, if you haven't already, please sign up to PollSit. Come find me afterwards. It's a couple hours of your day, and if you do more than 4 hours, you will get free food. And, quickly, as you all know, the last election was a tie. This runoff is probably going to be just as close. We're expecting that the margin of victory will just be 1 vote. So I'm asking all of you, go talk about the fact that it was a tie. Go take a minute of your time to talk about the election in class tomorrow, at lunch or dinner, or hanging out with friends, because your conversation this time matters. You could change someone's mind, and that person could swing the election. You will probably never have this opportunity again, not just in our union election, but in any general election. Don't miss it. Go vote tomorrow. It truly does matter.